Welcome to After Hours. We're here to break down and kick off the macro, micro, and trend news that we see this week. And we're here for Traders Post. As always, I am Tom Hartman alongside Mike Christensen. How's it going, Mike?
Doing well. We forgot the date. Usually you like to kick off the date that we've got this running on. So December 6th of 2024.
That's right. I should start
I
off
fill
with
that in for you.
Excellent. I thought this week was going to be a slow news week, Monday, Tuesday, and then things just started to kick off. Pretty interesting what's been going on. The three main topics we want to cover today will be the UnitedHealthcare attack that happened, the Powell comments at the DealBook summit for this week, and then, of course, the Hawk Tuah meme scheme that's just been blowing up my Twitter and YouTube. It's been so at the end, it turns out there's all kinds of things to talk about. Now, I did want to start off with the first one with the UnitedHealthcare CEO that did get killed. And what's been interesting about this is not that the killing occurred, which is tragic, and I can imagine how devastating it was. This person was not in a field where you'd expect something like this to happen. The way that it even all occurred, it looked like specifically a deliberate hit. There's not
It was a movie scene. This is not something we see in real life. When I saw the footage of it taking place, it looked unreal to me, like we're watching a new movie that just came out. And of course, it's extremely tragic. And you're right. This is not a domain in which you would expect something like this to happen. However upset we are about the domain of the healthcare industry, you don't expect an executive to be marked like this. Maybe this would be something closer related to drug crimes or, criminal activity. But at this level, this is insane.
Well, if there's anything crazier than what occurred, it's the response to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been inside of the comment threads and seen the videos that are coming out, but the
general apathy is what I'm seeing. There's a whole lot of
downright schadenfreude
right
about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go too deep into it, but I did want to show you what I thought was a quintessential example of what's going on, but articulated in a way that more digestible. So I just want to play this for you, and we'll come back on the other side.
Sure. We're not hearing it, Tom.
Oh, okay. 1 second. We started.
Died from complications due to diabetes.
Diabetes.
I don't care that the CEO of UnitedHealthcare was also a husband and father. My mom died from complications due to diabetes. Diabetes requires a lot of supply, not just things like pumps, insulin, needles, test strips. It's things like batteries, alcohol wipes, Band-Aids, tape, gauze. 6 months before my mom died, her health insurance let her know that all of the things that she had been prescribed and insured for the last 10, 15 years of her life were no longer going to be covered. The insulin her life depended on, the pumps her life depended on, and the batteries that go in those pumps. The morning after my mom died, and I'm talking not even 24 hours after, 7 a.m., the morning after my mom died, a box full of all of my mom's supplies for the next 4-6 months showed up on my front step. And inside the box, with all of her supplies, there was a letter that said, "Due to the change in your current situation, we have now fully insured and covered your supplies." The current change in situation was listed as death. Patient expiration. So yeah, it makes sense that all of the health insurance companies in the United States have now taken their CEOs off their websites, because it's not a matter of if this happens next, it's when.
That's pretty intense there. The thing that bothers me, and this is what I wanted to come at you at to get your opinion. I get that people are upset with institutions, whatever kind of institutions there are, and the mistakes that they make and the corruption that can occur. But the retaliation, I mean, for my part, I think it's completely unacceptable, and I could understand how some people might be able to justify it in their minds because it's not happening to them directly. But what we're seeing right now, it seems to be a rash of populist uprising. This is the sort of thing that happens with the populist uprising. They go, look, the institutions and law enforcement and all that, they're not going to do anything. We have to take matters into our own hands. And assuming that what it looks like that the shooting occurred because the person was upset about some sort of policy that was denied or delayed or anything that might have resulted in their partner or loved one losing their life or suffering. I could totally understand that. But now if people see it in their hearts to now take matters into their own hands and now start executing people, this is not the Robin Hood thing that some people in the comments are making it out to be. This is the slippery slope to something that could be really, really terrible, where it could be justified in anyone's mind. So I want to get your take on that. Like the populist uprising part of it seems to be really on brand with what we're seeing right now with this, and really timely with this whole fourth turning thing, where we're in the cycle where people just go into institutions, we'd rather tear it down and by any means necessary.
Yeah, I think the emotional response is warranted. People dislike insurance providers as well as healthcare companies for a lot of valid reasons. We have a very broken system in America here, and there's not really a free market landscape that invites and encourages competition in a way that ultimately drives more value to the end recipients of the healthcare services that we receive. Worse than that, I'm seeing that what I would call the institutional imperative is ultimately what drives a lot of the restrictions as well as the lack of care that we end up receiving. And I recognize that's not my phrase, the institutional imperative. Typically, what you would see with publicly traded companies is a drive to increase shareholder value. And that's what these healthcare companies are doing, is they're taking any measures necessary in order to continue to see increased earnings. And under the UnitedHealthcare brand, I think Brian was responsible for something like $32 billion in operating profit in 2023. And the amount of increased earnings happening year over year with all of these major players, including the CVS Group, Molina, Centene, all of these healthcare providers are seeing increased earnings year after year after year. And I can see how these organizations would start to take what I would consider unjustifiable measures in order to increase that shareholder value at the expense of American individuals. And I think that's what frustrates me the most about the whole structure of our healthcare system, is that so much of the services that we rely on are driven by the demand for profits. So, I mean, like, number one topic to cover here is the healthcare companies obviously took a huge hit in the markets this week for potentially good reason. But it's not really driven by any economic factors. You look at each one of these companies, they all have fantastic earnings, growing earnings year over year, forecasted earning increases. What we need to see is a regulatory change here, which, John even mentioned here in the comments, maybe they shouldn't be public. That's the first thing I think of, is companies that are responsible for what I would consider what should be a constitutional right here in America, to have access to healthcare in a way that's accessible for the vast majority of Americans, means that it shouldn't be driven by this institutional imperative. That's great for other industries. It's great for competitive landscapes that are subjected to an open and fair competitive market and landscape. But that is not the case for healthcare companies. They basically have a stranglehold over most aspects of how healthcare is delivered in the United States. And I just think it's completely unfair to the vast majority of us. So number one would be, should healthcare companies even be allowed to be publicly traded? And if they are within the private domain, what are their incentives? Can there be incentives tied to a regulatory framework that ensures the delivery of good services, valuable services to Americans, as opposed to it being driven by profit? So what are your thoughts?
So I think I understand the spirit of what you're saying there. I worry that we try to. So this is how I try to think of it. I go, okay, if none of these systems existed, if I had to just live on my own, shack in the woods, I had to take care of everything myself, there'd be all these opportunities, all these things that I take for granted right now that I would not be able to have access to. I'm making my own home and healing my own stuff. I break my own leg, I got to fix it myself. I'd rather be in a civilization where there's some expectation that institutions and other entities will take care of that for me. All right. So then, what does that come with? That comes with corruption. Corruption exists in anything. Exists within the body. Exists within society. Exists within any institution. So the idea isn't that um, uh, we can avoid corruption. It's just that we need to have a mechanism to be able to address corruption. That's the whole thing. This is why I love the American Constitution so much. The idea is like, okay, we can't avoid corruption. Let's try to delay it as long as possible and put the onus on the people to revivify the system regularly in order to reduce corruption, and then we start again from a 0 point. That's how we see the fork turning. And so the profit motive of companies to try to get obscene profits, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I want them to be able to do that. I want entities out there who are thinking to themselves, hey, how can I deliver the best product? How can I do whatever in order to get the most money possible? The corruption here, though, is that because of the regulatory environment, the incentive to make as much money as possible, the path of least resistance to that is through the corruption path, right? If you're gonna, how do we, who here, was it Jay Feinman wrote this book, Delay, Deny, Defend,
Right.
that basically talks about why insurance companies don't pay claims and what you can do about it. So when the corruption path is the easiest way in order to make lots of money, that's the problem, not the profit motive, just the path of least resistance. And this is where I want to see more grassroots efforts in order to try to change public opinion. So these companies are not only relying on the path of least resistance through the regulatory framework in order to make it, they're also relying on the opaqueness of the whole process. We're not talking to each other and collaborating in such a way in order to show, hey, we know what we're doing, what you're doing, and we're going to name everybody at that company and anyone who ever works there. We're going to make it so that you're pariahs within the culture. We don't do that. We don't do the stuff like what I would like to see, stuff like where what happened with GameStop, where where the hive mind decided, hey, we can manipulate the markets, the publicly traded company, the asset in such a way as to send a message that we're here and we can actually, there's some levers that we can control. So you can imagine if there was a way for the people concerned to get together and make the stock price for UNH collapse, to make it so that they go, whoa, there's our profit incentive has been hindered. One, we have the status thing that we're being named constantly, and we're on blockchains, people are putting up billboards with our name on it saying this is what we're doing, as opposed to just talking quietly in some 4chan thread. And they're trying to manipulate our stock to make it appear that even though we have great earnings and all that we're not good. But the idea of taking up a gun and shooting somebody, that to me is like when I see protests in the streets where they're rioting and burning buildings because we want to draw attention to the subject. Yeah. Okay. That's not going to work. Okay. That doesn't really work long term. And so that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I agree. I obviously don't want to see violence as a measure of, or a method or mechanism or catalyst for change. That's the worst path to take. However, I think it's fair to say that it has had an immediate effect. One of the other providers, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, had a policy that they were implementing about a month and a half ago that was designed to deny the cost of or paying out on insurance claims for anesthesia costs if the surgery went longer than their arbitrary estimate of how long a surgery should take. So an example would be like, a liver transplant might take 3 or 4 hours to do. And in their policy, if it took longer than a half hour, then they wouldn't pay out on a claim for that. Well, obviously that's ridiculous. Why should a health insurance company be responsible for deciding arbitrarily how long a surgery should take and then decide not to pay the claim as a result? That is obviously where the slippery slope begins, is when health insurance companies are now creating the incentive for doctors to move quickly so that they can get the revenue that they need in order to cover their expenses. So what do we end up with? We'll end up with lower care quality or lower quality care as a result of them needing to speed up the process. Otherwise, they're not going to get paid out by the health insurance companies. That's part of the overhaul we need from a regulatory standpoint, is removing the power that these health insurance companies have on deciding which claims they're allowed to just deny. What's interesting, though, is that when this event took place, there was already pretty big news about this issue, but it's unheard by most Americans. So now the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, which, by the way, is just a subsidiary of UnitedHealth Group, it's not even the main corporation, is assassinated. Immediately, Blue Cross Blue Shield takes action and decides that they're going to suspend their plan to implement this limit on coverage for anesthesia.
Wow.
So, and this is news as of yesterday. And so I think it's important to recognize that we do need attention on this issue, and we do need to put pressure on the health insurance companies to provide the care that they've promised us. And ultimately, if they're driven by profit and increasing earnings year after year after year, and the way the tool that they're using to continue to have earnings growth is by figuring out what not to pay for, we have a serious problem on our hands.
So are you worried at all that they'll just put a more ruthless CEO in charge, and that this problem will be actually worse later on because the only person who would want this job now is someone even more corrupt? Or do you think that they might actually put someone like, hey, no, we got to have things differently and change things drastically right from the get-go?
Well, I think maybe part of the awareness around this topic comes down to arming your average citizen with tools they need in order to fight back with the insurance companies. I'm sure that this will be a weekend reading for me, but even just catching up on that book, that the bullets that were shot were apparently kind of somewhat related to or based on, is designed to give you some of the tools you need in order to appeal your the rejection of your health coverage. And part of that is just that we are entitled to a fair hearing on all of these rejected insurance claims that we submit. If you even use the words fair hearing for the most part with your insurance company, they'll find a way to settle with you as quickly as possible, because getting into the court system and suing a company for a fair hearing is obviously our afforded constitutional right. And it ends up costing them more in litigation than it's worth. So typically they'll respond pretty positively to that. I believe that is one of potentially many tools that can be used in order to try to win back the right you have to the healthcare services that you should be afforded for all those premiums that we're paying every year. But that requires that we all bring more awareness to this problem and some of the solutions that can be implemented. I'm certainly no expert on this topic, but I want to dive into what can really be done here.
I'll leave it at this for my end. This is the promise that I wanted for crypto. I would love someone to spin up a project, and anybody who has a claim denied, they put the name of everybody involved. They put all the details on to a blockchain, and we just have this, like we have Amber Alerts on our phone. You're getting whatever way we find a way of making sure that everybody knows, hey, this is what they're doing at this company. I just find that it's up to the population to not just ask for transparency, but make it so. Come together and make it so, and not wait until something dramatic this happens. And I really, really, really want for the next 80 years, in the next four turnings, for the idea to be like, how do we force transparency on every single institution that we're dealing with, so that we actually know what's going on? And fine, that'll lead to corruption down the line, but that's for people 80 years from now to decide when corruption is to be.
I love that. And I now see a little bit more clearly your vision for what you mean by grassroots efforts. That's certainly the type of empowerment, or the type of tool that we need. There was maybe an example of this out there. There was a app a number of years ago called oh, shoot, I can't remember exactly what it was called. Everybody in the tech industry was sharing it with each other. Maybe you remember what it is, but it would give you salary insights into the
Glassnode?
roles. What's that?
Glassdoor?
Not Glassdoor. It was similar to Glassdoor, and I know that that was another example of where we can use a resource where people can start publishing their salaries so that you're aware of the ranges that people are being paid, and give you some empowerment to negotiate for higher salary with your employer. I think what you're describing here is, let's create transparency around the claims that are being rejected and approved based on different reasoning in some kind of publicly available, non-personally identifiable way that has a collective and now a massive repository that gives us a lot more insight and transparency as to what's happening out there. We don't have a lot of choice. There's only a handful of real providers at the end of the day that are owned by 7 or 8 different companies. But at least the transparency allows us to understand, okay, in my particular scenario, how can I respond in a way that will get me the results that I'm hoping for. So I totally agree with you. I think we can leverage technology for this. We can leverage community, but we really have to rally around this problem in a way that helps us recognize that we are very powerful as a collective, rather than trying to fight the health insurance companies on a one-on-one basis.
That's right. Because, and this I told my friend the other day. He was saying something like, "Hey, we should have something like the French Revolution, where we're off with their heads sort of situation with the elites and those who run institutions." And I had to remind them, yeah, that all sounded good at the beginning. Then they went from those people to teachers, then from teachers to those who had anything above anybody else, and then we had the Dark Ages for 400 years. So just be careful with this whole revolution thing that happens. That the corruption happens also within the you get a big enough mob together, even thought wise, there'll be a corrupting force there as well who tries to use it for gains for themselves. And so I just don't like the momentum towards hey, there's some sort of benefit to this assassination attempt. There might be maybe I should do it too. And then next thing you know, you never know where that goes.
Then we have the Purge, or a modified version of the Purge. Every Friday, every third Friday of the year, you get an opportunity to kill a healthcare executive.
Exactly.
Great. I'm already using terms that are going to get this YouTube clip pulled down.
All right. So let's move on to another institution, which is my favorite institution, the central bank, the Federal Reserve. Because you might be wondering, why on Wednesday did the Bitcoin spike to 100,000 and then pull back? Well, my friend, it looks like it's because of our buddy Jerome money printer Powell. I just want to play a clip here from him at the DealBook Summit. I think he's been interviewed by Andrew Sorkin here. Just a quick 20 seconds just to hear what he says about Bitcoin.
People use Bitcoin as a speculative asset, right? It's like gold. It's just like gold, only it's virtual. It's digital. People are not using it as a form of payment or as a store of value. It's highly volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar. It's really a competitor for gold. That's really how I think of it.
All right, I'm going to play that one more time. We're short. Just hit on the points that he's comparing it to gold, and he's saying how it's not a currency. Just want to play the 20 seconds one more time.
People use Bitcoin as a speculative asset, right? It's like gold. It's just like gold, only it's virtual. It's digital. People are not using it as a form of payment or as a store of value. It's highly volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar. It's really a competitor for gold. That's really how I think of it.
It's a competitor for gold.
That's right.
So, how much Bitcoin is the government about to purchase?
Exactly.
That is the next question.
That's right. Now he tried to sort of he's thinking on the fly here, but this is the first time I've heard Jerome Powell clearly state that he thinks Bitcoin is like gold.
How much Bitcoin do you think Powell owns? That's a question for the comments here as well. He's got to own some.
That's right.
He's got to own some. Yeah. He would have to reveal that on public statements, right?
Not only if he owns it directly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
All right. Here's the thing. Okay. So, he might flippantly say, "Well, it's like gold." Okay, fine. Gold is the other reserve asset that central banks hold. they hold currency, they hold treasury bonds, and then they hold. And if they're going to hold Bitcoin, then that means they're going to have to start collecting billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And we already started seeing some central banks around the world saying this. And the fact that he just saying nonchalantly, I mean, I've watched, I think, everything Jerome Powell has said publicly for the last 5 years. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And he said this super casually. And it was such a news that Bitcoin spiked to 100,000, right? He also says a contradictory statement here. He says it's like gold. But Bitcoin's not used as a currency and it's not used as a store of value. Well, that's what gold is.
It's that last part that was actually interesting to me, that he doesn't see Bitcoin being used as a store of value, when I think that there's a fair amount of the cryptocurrency market that does see it as a store of value. But in notional terms, in trading volume terms, he's right. Most people are speculating on the trading volume or the trading activity around crypto, which is what elevates its volatility and makes it an interesting asset class to begin with.
Right, but then he wouldn't say it's like gold, because that's how people trade gold.
Which is the part I'm having trouble reconciling, because if he sees it as a competitor to gold, then you would inherently have to see it as a store of value.
That's right. So gold value as a store of value, or he said it's not as currency, or as a jewelry or industrial usage.
But he was also clarifying that he sees people. He was saying people don't see it as a store of value, which doesn't mean that the government's stance isn't that they don't see it. They probably do see it as a store of value, is my point.
Well, it has to be literally the only characteristic of gold that he could even be referring to when he's saying that Bitcoin is like gold. If it's virtual and it's not used in industrial practices or in jewelry,
That's
the
right.
only other use for gold is a store of value.
Now, as a reminder, the government already owns an incredible amount of Bitcoin. They own about 200. Yes, that all came from forfeitures for the most part. But they own about 213,000 Bitcoin at this point. And there doesn't appear to be any expectation that they're going to offload that Bitcoin that I'm aware of. Have you heard anything to that effect?
No, in fact, RFK and the campaign trail were saying that the Trump administration should buy more.
Right?
Yeah,
Add it to the treasury.
Exactly.
Could you imagine a Fed's mandate that they have to start owning more Bitcoin?
Unbelievable. Incredible that the Bitcoiners were absolutely right. I cannot believe in my lifetime they're saying the multiple members of the American government are saying, hey, look, Bitcoin, maybe we should be having it. I mean, the price, the adoption rate that we're seeing, the prices, the quotes we've had for Bitcoin, let's say 150,000, 200,000, 500,000. If the U.S. government starts buying gold as a reserve asset, that means every other central bank is going to start doing the same. Then I think my theory that Bitcoin is not in this long-term power curve, that what we are is really that Bitcoin's been in a bull flag since the beginning. That means we break out from the bull flag, and the pull up will be the same length as all the gains of Bitcoin, literally from the beginning to now. So now the claims, the Cathy Wood claims, the Saylor claims, the Max Kaiser claims of Bitcoin at astronomical levels is like conservative if central banks start buying Bitcoin.
It is. I think what concerns me, and this has been tough, I know you know for a long time now, I've also been one of the major speculators in the crypto space, and I've never seen the long-term value of cryptocurrency the way that maximalists have. The more I've heard from Saylor, though, especially now that we've been covering some of his content, I'm like, okay, this guy's got me a little bit convinced that there's something here that I'm not really thinking about from a 100, 200 year perspective, as you consider the potential that Bitcoin really has. And by the way, Bitcoin is really the only one that has these properties that we're describing. Of all the other cryptocurrencies out there, it's the only one that actually makes sense to me, and to Saylor for that matter, which is why he's a Bitcoin maxi. But the larger question I end up having is, imagine a world in which there is no competition for a dominant country-based currency as our store of value anymore, by which we denominate our trade across the world. That means there's no competition of the US dollar versus BRICS nations, we're effectively all transacting across the same denominated currency. What does that look like to you if we start using Bitcoin to transact in that way?
Well, I don't think it can actually be used as a currency because the limited nature of the Bitcoin, the supply, and so there's no elasticity because there's no inflation rate to it.
Mm.
And so people argue you have this infinite divisibility, but that's actually deflationary. Um, so, but as a reserve asset, it makes a huge amount of sense because then it adds a
So you see it being as partially used as a reserve asset to their currency within their nation. So maybe you've got gold as part of your reserve, and Bitcoin is maybe a portion of that reserve as well.
exactly. What Bitcoin, just to push back on what you're saying before about the idea that Bitcoin's the only one that can do this. I think the reason why that's the case now is that there's just too much risk in order to focus on the other utility cases that the other coins have been bringing. Some of the value that those things have been bringing has actually been pretty interesting, just doesn't have the adoption rate. So think of it in terms of asynchronous JavaScript, right? Asynchronous JavaScript has existed for a long period of time, but people didn't really put a lot of effort into it because the technology, the computer technology, didn't get to the point where it really made sense to do that. But as soon as it got to the level where we had enough space on the computer, we had enough processing power, and we needed to be able to perform actions asynchronously, then JavaScript was revived, and we had this async thing, this feature within the browser that could be used. And now to find apps that don't have live reload and JavaScript information, and can you imagine if every time you clicked on an email, I had to refresh the entire page? Like now we'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous. But then it opens up other avenues, other things that we could have done, but we didn't do before. So I think in the crypto space is the same thing. The Bitcoin is proof that a digital asset can be treated like a physical thing.
So I think you're right. When I think about other cryptocurrencies, I see them as solutions to other technological problems.
That's right.
The way we transact, the way that we create contracts with one another, the way that we create rewards. We can, leverage, like Ethereum contracts to create an agreement between parties in which the final transaction is then released, and it serves as a form of a trust or escrow, if you will. And I get the transaction layer around that, and the technology can be leveraged in that way. Peter made a point here in the comments. He sees Cardano as the currency and Bitcoin as the reserve asset, and I'm inclined to agree. Where I see the value of other cryptocurrencies from a technology standpoint, but I don't see other countries adopting a different type of cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin as a reserve asset, if we're speaking in those terms. Your thoughts there?
I think it's I think we have to not do our version of boomer thinking, that we have to yeah, like when we were in school, they would say stuff like you can't rely on the calculator because sometimes the calculator makes mistakes and you have to know how to do this all manually. You're not gonna have a calculator all the time. And obviously now we have a calculator all the time. The benefits that we're having, the things that the cryptocurrencies, other cryptocurrencies allow us to do are things that are just not like anything we're used to conceptualizing. In the same way that when Craigslist first started, I don't know if you remember when Craigslist first started, it just exploded. It was like people were like, wait, what? I could just post directly and be in contact with other people. I don't have to go through a third thing. I could just literally arrange to go buy a toaster from someone, the neighborhood over, and I could just get a toaster for $20. That would have cost me $60. And
it's the only way I buy toasters, by the way.
Right. But do you remember how it was just like people just had to wrap their heads around? They're like, okay, but it's not secure and it's dangerous, so you're going to meet random people or whatever. And then people are like, no, we'll figure out a way of making this safe for ourselves. Have different communities, have different ways of using it. And it was sort of, but do you remember how it was hard to like replicate that at first? At first, like it was years before we got Facebook Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
It was years before we got eBay the way it was, where it's like a whole industry in and of itself. So for me, Bitcoin is like Craigslist at first, where conceptually we're like, okay, how do we get this? Oh, it turns out if Bitcoin is like used on the balance sheet of a company, that might change the way that the company operates because now we have an asset that's the Michael Saylor route. Oh, it turns out if we have Bitcoin as a back and wrap Bitcoin in some sort of art, a digital art, that somehow now that might be unique and valuable in itself. Oh, so we're trying to figure out this material that we created. So to me, it's very much like when human beings started with metalworking. We had iron, we had copper. We started with metalworking, and then we figured out, alloys. Oh, steel is actually way better, but we have to learn how to forge with steel. And then all of a sudden, steel has this property that if you break it and reforge it, it's stronger than the steel that was there beforehand. Oh my God. And so I think we're going to find these sort of like the alloy version of this, but we're getting out of the Stone Age and we're just learning about the base metals, Bitcoin, and we're touching on these other things. And once we figure out actually how to do it, we'll have a whole new arsenal.
So I think that's a fair and accurate statement, just because of the potential any cryptocurrency has to provide additional value beyond just being a reserve asset. Because we're talking about software-driven assets here, that means we can write the software to do whatever we want, which might mean that as a sovereign entity, I might want the currency to behave a certain way in which I can write that into the protocol. And we could be looking at another protocol in the future that solves specific problems that occur at a governmental level when it comes to using that currency. For example, maybe you wanted to be able to, use it as a reserve currency, but also it needs to be able to track its use within the rest of the currency network, right, by which its reserve is based on. I'm having a hard time conceptualizing other avenues, but I think what I'm saying is the technology can be built any way we want it to. So I agree with you that maybe something in the future could replace the current winner, if you will. But I believe the reason Bitcoin is the winner is largely because of its stability. It's not a project that is going to disappear anytime soon. It's had the most notional trading volume. It has the properties that give it its reserve value because there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And I think the simplicity of it makes it really, really attractive. Some of these other projects end up going so far that they've almost introduced so much complexity that they're not as attractive as a result. Well,
so for example, Bitcoin does not have any privacy to it, right? Big problem we're having. We're going to talk about Hawk Tuah in a second. This is a big problem. We can trace everything that's going on inside of the crypto networks. Actually,
which is, it's a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Right. But it makes it so that it's completely unusable in certain other circumstances, right? Like a central bank's not going to want people to know what they're doing with the cryptocurrency, like their holdings of Bitcoin. So we need some other mechanism. So for example, I'm excited by Midnight that's being created by the Cardano network that allows for zero knowledge proofs. So all the benefits of the confirming transactions within crypto, but privacy layers. We're going to see cryptocurrencies that are specific for, let's say, voting systems. Can you imagine if our election systems had it and everyone could just vote from their phones and we can all see, confirm the validity of the vote, but without divulging who we voted for? I can't wait to see that happen. But that requires its own crypto. We can't use Bitcoin for that. And there's all these different use cases. The BitTorrent to be incentivized to share files, new ways for people to cryptocurrencies that are tied to different units within the AI space, so that you can get paid for when an AI uses part of a book that you wrote. Attribution wise, there's all these different ways that Bitcoin just can't solve. What Bitcoin is doing is proving to us that we can actually go down this path in the same way that Maxwell's laws allow us to understand, hey, we can actually do telecommunication abroad in a completely different way. We don't need to send some guy on a horse with a letter to someone else. So that's where I think we're at right now, and I don't see anything because of Bitcoin's shortcomings. I think it's a promise that we're going to have other competing cryptocurrencies that do different things that are just as important, just as well known as Bitcoin.
Let's move on to Hawk Tuah. How is she gaining even more fame than she had before? How is this back again?
Okay, so I want to just show what I think. This is a YouTube short that I thought nicely summed up the whole thing in less than a minute. Here, 1 second. So if you guys haven't heard about this Hawk Tuah thing, this will be a nice introduction.
Can't hear this one. Let's try it again.
Oh. Strange.
My Hawk meme coin is live!
Could Hawk Tuah girl be in serious trouble? Scamming allegations are being aimed at Haley Welch after her crypto meme coin launch.
This is one of the most miserable, horrible launches I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, then why the f are you on?
The launch of the coin was questioned immediately. The fees for buying Hawk were 15% on top of the transaction cost, something that CoffeeZilla did not take kindly to.
You guys generated over $1 million in fees while y'all's fans got rug pulled.
After the coin surged on launch, it's alleged that tokens held by insiders of the project were sold within 15 minutes of that launch for millions and millions of dollars, crashing the price entirely and losing fans thousands.
This is the worst tokenomics I've ever seen, and it is a scam.
All right. So
Fascinating.
I have one question to ask you, because everyone has takes all over the place about the token, about if she's a scammer, is this a rug pull, the whole thing. Plenty of other information out there. You can go see that. I care about one thing and one thing only. I don't understand why meme coins that have no utility, with the whole point as a hype, the whole thing is a rug pull right from the beginning. The whole thing is a musical chairs, and the only thing people are actually upset about is that they didn't get to sell into the volume. That's it.
Yeah.
They're like, you sold too quickly into the volume. I wanted you to wait. Let me sell into the volume too. You do it slowly, and we're gonna get money from the next guy down the greater fool down the road, who's eventually gonna, someone at the end is eventually gonna lose their money. In fact, no one lost any more money than, like, if you look at what would be lost when a coin eventually fizzles out, they're going to lose that. Someone's going to lose that at the end anyway. So I don't get why they're upset about this. Everyone wanted to sell into the next guy.
That is true. They're all victims of the gambling environment that can take place pretty commonly within the cryptocurrency environment. It's
victims.
It's well, yeah. I mean, you knew the risks when you got into it. It's all greater fool theory. You bought it because you expect it to go up, and you're going to try to sell it to the next guy who thinks it's still going to go up. That is, I mean, essentially my problem with most cryptocurrencies, and they're largely divorced from any underlying value in my mind. I have a really hard time understanding why you would put money in any project other than the ones that are, measurable from a volatility perspective and are something that you can hold over long periods of time. Bitcoin, Ethereum, those make sense to me. I can hold those for long periods. I can leverage those with comfort. They're in a regulated space. So yeah, I don't know that anybody should be surprised if a tiny meme coin gets launched on one of these exchanges and you've paid a 15% fee just for the privilege of buying it, which means that money's lost right away. Now you have a 15% hurdle to get past, right, which is already difficult in most environments. Unless the volatility is in the hundreds or thousands of percent, you already have a tough job of actually getting past 15%. Especially if you're trading on very short-term periods. And for this to go down that fast in a 15-minute period, nobody even stood a chance here. So yeah. I mean, this was clearly an environment of individuals that just didn't quite understand what they were getting involved in, for sure.
Well, people are calling for her to be, like, jailed. And I think this is too much.
Is that too far?
Yeah, because she never promised anyone would make money off of it.
Well, this is why the SEC wants to regulate this space so badly. if you're going to introduce a currency, especially under the guise that there's an opportunity for you to earn a return, then this is sincerely duping people, especially if your plan all along was to sell it immediately when there's enough volume. We saw this, 2-3 weeks ago? Young 14-year-old kid launched a meme coin and eventually and ultimately rug pulled everybody who got involved. And then went on a live stream and flipped everybody off.
That's right.
That's deceit. And I think that there is a fit punishment for those crimes. If you're ultimately doing this for the purpose of deceiving uninformed investors, then yeah, there is a crime being conducted there.
Okay, so here's the nuance here. I think is lacking. So, SafeMoon, which is my favorite meme cryptocurrency, it's the Fire Festival of cryptocurrencies, and it's
Fire Festival. Is it that big of a disaster?
Oh my God! It was Braden John Caroni, the CEO. I mean, just completely lied to people. The idea that SafeMoon was supposed to be this coin that's supposed to be this meme coin, but we're safely going to go to the moon, and everyone's going to make money, and blah blah blah. And there was all these different things like, oh man, I should send you the documentaries for it afterwards. But stuff like they're going to build crypto-powered windmills in Gambia in order to power their economy, and then the people holding the coin would get part of that. They have these tokenomics that disincentivize people. Like if you transacted with it, you were charged this huge fee on top of it, and it would be like, oh, it's to encourage people to hold it, because when you do that, part of that fee is broken up and given to everybody else. Distribution, or they used to call it reflections.
Reflections.
If people try
fancy
to
word.
you get part of it. So it's this whole thing. It was this promise, literally in the name, SafeMoon, that your promise profits, right? That's the whole idea, safe profits. And it turned out they were actually draining the liquidity pool. They were using the money by, cars and mansions, and I mean everything you can imagine of like somebody who was just really stealing your money. This is what they were doing. Celsius, the Alex Mashinsky. I don't know if you saw, he pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud, billions of dollars, faking the whole thing. They had a whole build a system. This, to me, these are clear evidence of fraud. This is a girl who got 15 minutes of fame, was clearly, I mean, she didn't code this script. Someone must have come to her and said, hey, here's $125,000. You just will brand it with your thing. They promised her the moon about what they're going to be doing, and then they pre-sold the tokens to other people and who pumped the dump into the market. But she didn't do any of that stuff.
That's debatable. You're giving her a bit of a free pass here because we've seen evidence
until proven guilty.
I'm with you. However, I don't think we should automatically assume that she was completely ignorant of what was happening here. There have been many instances of rug pulls in the past that are led by influencers who claim they had no idea these events were happening. They had no idea how, the trading environment worked, or that there was going to be a rug pull at all. And I call bullshit all day long. There's a promise of insane profits to be made on a lot of suckers who are going to put money into something like this. And I find it very hard to believe that anybody who gets involved in these meme coin launches isn't aware of the profit that will come from it. All you need to do is do a Google search of other people who've launched meme coins, and you can see there's countless stories that fall into this framework. So I highly doubt that she was unaware of exactly what was going to play out here. That's a struggle for me, Tom. You're going to have to help me.
Really?
Yeah.
So I listened to her on the Twitter Spaces that happened. I'm not going to play any of that. It's just too painful to listen to, and I could hardly imagine someone so clueless as to what is going on. Like, she seemed to be. If you were going to scam anybody like this,
how convenient for her defense. Play stupid. That's what I would do.
Fair enough. Okay, fine. All right, so let's say she is guilty. All right, let's say all that. The people who are buying the coins, their plan was to, in a sense, screw the next people down the road. They're not honorable people anyway.
Well,
They wanted to.
100%. How many insiders were involved in the project before it even launched on the DEX?
Oh,
there were
some.
already significant holders, right?
Significant, yes.
Yeah. So she's involved with all of those individuals as well. They all had this.
Even the regular guy who's buying it off of the Solana network, the regular Joe Blow,
Yeah.
he's also hoping to sell into the next guy. So I don't understand that if she's a criminal, like if she committed a crime here, they're all part of it. They're all accomplices, aren't they?
100%. The whole group is. Everybody
No,
involved.
I mean like regular people who bought the token.
No. So regular people who bought the token believe that this is another meme craze that's going to result in profit for them, and it would last longer than 15 minutes. But instead, what happened, there was enough volume that appeared on chain, and the original holders immediately started selling into that activity within 15 minutes.
So is it still a crime if they sold into it over the next 4 years?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? So this is why we have like lockup periods on preferred stock, or we have a regulatory framework in place within the equities markets where directors and officers of companies are required to publish their sold shares of a company, and they have to report that because we need to know who's actually selling at certain times, right? So I would say that if we had that, it's not necessarily based on the time, it's based on transparency. What we don't know, because of the nature of how these environments work, is whether or not they really were selling at the top there. And if we discover that they sold an enormous amount of their holdings at the top, then there you go. That's the incontrovertible proof that they were scamming all of these individuals.
So if it did take a longer period of time, that would be better.
Well, it depends on how much they were selling, right? If I started a project myself and I decided, okay, listen, just like I would be selling a small percentage of my shares in order to fund purchases. This happens all the time. Whenever we look at insider trading that occurs in the equities markets, you might see that a CEO or a CFO has sold 100,000 shares of their 32 million shares that they have because they wanted to buy a boat or a house or something like that, or fund something, they needed some cash flow or whatever. That is reported, and it's usually some small amount, which obviously gives us confidence that there isn't some signal here that all the people at the top of the company are trying to bail out of the organization. Mm-hmm. If this were reported in a way that was transparent, and we could see that they were like, oh, you know what? I see a little bit here. I see some activity here. I need to sell a little bit off the top. Maybe I would feel a little more comfortable with this, but I'm fairly confident that they probably sold all of their holdings at the top there.
Okay, so your problem, you're saying, Tom, I understand it's a game of musical chairs. I get that. But the people the regular Joe Blow who's buying it, they think they're getting into an honest game of musical chairs.
Yes.
What they didn't know is that people earmarked some chairs to other people and they immediately got it. So they were already doomed to lose. Fine. So I totally understand that.
Yeah. This is a street hustle. Plain and simple.
Well, what I don't want to happen is what happened with SafeMoon, where I don't want this to be that they hang this whole loss on her neck, and everyone who made the bulk of the money walk away scot-free. That's what I don't want. In the SafeMoon thing, there's a few people who got indicted, and then a bunch of these other people that I saw in the community hyping things up, getting money from whatever, who clearly knew there was this problem to begin with. They came out of the work afterwards. Then you should be right there with them. You should have the ankle bracelet monitor right along with Crony. So, and they were talking about Hawk Tuah in the Twitter spaces as if they're gonna, it's all her. The developers and all the different people. It's like, hey, you guys also go to jail too.
Right. Well, if any of this is actually adjudicated, they'll be pulled in and indicted as well. If they played a role to actually promote it, and there's enough of a class action suit here of people who have a real claim, then yeah, they'll be drug in as well. You don't just get to say, hey, I had no involvement here, it was all her, and point your finger.
All right, we'll see. All right, well, I'll end on this on a hopeful note. I forget the name of the guy who did Fire Festival. He started Fire Festival 2. I don't know if you saw this.
I did.
And so there's a redemption arc for everybody if they're willing to take it. And I'll buy Hawk Tuah token 2 as soon as it comes out.
Right. Listen, we spent half of the podcast here really covering this idea of the utility that cryptocurrencies can provide, a future world that we can all enjoy. If you're going to go start a project, could you please just do it legitimately? Can you build something that actually serves the world instead of just trying to profit from a rug pull? Please.
Agreed. Biggest endorsement for Cardano I have ever seen. Thank you, Mike. All right, so we'll leave it there for this week. We'll be back on Tuesday for office hours, next Thursday for Blueprint, and next Friday for another after hours. Thank you very much, folks.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good weekend.